All right. So I know I shouldn't be doing this because this is a hot button issue, but I wanted to see what the wiki has to say about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So, unless you're living under a rock, this is a major um, issue on the news, and it's constantly being talked about, especially since the flare-up in October of 23. And yeah, let's see what this wiki has to offer. Seems like a long one. Quite long. A lot of sections. Suez, Yom Kippur, Lebanon. Alright, so Israeli Palestinian conflict is an ongoing military and political conflict about land and self determination within the territory of the former Mandatory Palestine. Key aspects of this conflict include the Israeli occupation of the West Bank and Gaza Strip, the status of Jerusalem, Israeli settlements, borders, security, water rights, the permit regime in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip, Palestinian freedom of movement, and the Palestinian right of return. So this is super loaded because there's, I don't know, 60 words in this, and like 50 words are their like entirely their own Wikipedia. So like you can go into every single one of these. All right, moving on. The conflict has its origin in the rise of Zionism in the late 19th century in Europe. So that's the end of the 18th century. It's the modern era. A movement which aimed to establish a Jewish state through the colonization of Palestine. Synchronously with the first arrival of Jewish settlers to Ottoman Palestine in 1882. All right, so the origins are in the late 19th, and at the same time, we have Jewish settlers arriving in Ottoman Palestine, which isn't the Mandatory Palestine, it's something else. The Zionist movement garnered the support of an imperial power in 1917. Balfour Declaration issued by Britain, which promised to support the creation of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. Right, so if my memory stands, the Ottoman Empire collapsed or was defeated in World War I, and I reckon the British usurped. That's not the right word. Conquered? Maybe conquered. Conquered previous territories held by the Ottomans, I reckon. I'm not sure about this. This is just if my memory stands. So, anyways, at some point, this Balfour Declaration garners support, which promised to support the creation of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. Following British occupation of the formerly Ottoman region during World War I, Mandatory Palestine was established as a British mandate, which I mean, they're using this word mandate. So, like, a mandate is like a territory that is held, I reckon. So, the mandate for Palestine was a League of Nations mandate for British administration. So, it's like the League of Nations mandates that the British will administer those territories. So it's Palestine and Transjordan. So increasing Jewish immigration led to tensions between Jews and Arabs, which grew into intercommunal conflict. In 1936, an Arab revolt erupted, demanding independence and an end to British support for Zionism, which was suppressed by the British. So the Brits were, in this conflict, on the side of the Jews, it seems, or the Zionists. So eventually the tensions led to the United Nations adopting a partition plan. So what the United Nations isn't the League of Nations, which I read about here, because that says League of Nations. United Nations, I think, is similar to the League of Nations, but maybe it's like an outgrowth of it, replaced it. I don't remember exactly. But that's the United Nations that we have today. The one that is headquartered in New York, if I remember correctly, and the one that hosts like a congregation, or not a parliament, but some sort of, it's a forum for like every country in the world to raise issues and vote on different motions and so on. So this United Nations adopts a partition plan in 1947. Which triggers a civil war. So the 1947-1948 civil war in Mandatory Palestine was the first phase of the 1948 Palestine War, and it broke out after the General Assembly of the United Nations adopted a resolution recommending the adoption of a partition plan. So during the ensuing 1948 Palestine War, which is fought in the territory of what had been, at the start of the war, British-ruled Mandate of Palestine. During the war, the British withdrew from Palestine. Zionist forces conquered territory and established the State of Israel. So these Zionists just conquer everything. I don't know. It says they conquer the territory. And then more than half of the Mandate's predominantly Palestinian Arab population fled or was expelled by Israeli forces. Okay, this is long. So by the end of the war, Israel was established on most of the former Mandate's territory. And the Gaza Strip and the West Bank were controlled by Egypt and Jordan. What do they have to do with this? I thought this was Palestine. So, okay. So it seems like Egypt is controlling the Gaza Strip, West Bank is Jordan. Since the 1967 Six-Day War, Israel has been occupying the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Why on earth would they conquer that? Also, its own wiki. Two Palestinian uprisings against Israeli occupation erupted in 1987 and 2000, the first and second Intifada? What the hell is that? Alright, so Israel's occupation resulted in Israel constructing illegal settlements there, creating a system of institutionalized discrimination against Palestinians under its occupation called Israeli apartheid. Welcome to Apartheid Street. Okay. So this discrimination includes Israel's denial of Palestinian refugees from their right of return and right to their lost properties. So they don't have those. It's denied. Israel also has drawn international condemnation for violating the human rights of the Palestinians. Should we do the last one? I'm getting kind of tired, but maybe I'll just trudge through. Okay, so the international community, with the exception of the US and Israel, has been in consensus since 1980s regarding the settlement of the conflict on the basis of the two-state solution along the 67 borders. All right, I'm getting a bit tired. I can't finish this. And I don't really understand what's going on here. Yeah, maybe I'll dig into some of these blue links later on. Okay, so we got a pick. What's the pick? It's occupied Palestinian territory. Okay. International. Got a bunch of lines on this map. Areas A and B, area C, airports. Yeah, I don't get what's going on here. All right. This was controversial, I'm sure, for some people, but yeah, excuse my ignorance.